Hello and welcome back to another devlog. This is number 43. So on Monday, I got started on working on this new room here. From last week, it was quite empty, just a gray box mostly. There was some detail work, but I went in and put a lot of environmental assets, finished up the walls, added decals, put a lot of props in here. I had some enemies placed here, but since they're not fully functional AI, that's not really my goal for this this phase of the project. Right now, I'm trying to focus on implementing uh, the entire uh, first level from the blueprint here, and that's going to take a while. Not just Graybox adding out the levels to the specifications, but actually going through and adding a first detail pass for production quality level. That's the plan, and that's what's most time consuming. So, following my creative process, I've been working with my existing asset library in asset inventory and kind of browsing through and getting ideas, like, and adding, bringing in more assets to the project that I didn't have before, and kind of creatively, like, okay, this might work here, that might work here, trying different things until you kind of get a feel for how you want to lay out the room, until it all comes together in some sort of sense. This doesn't mean it's the final design. It just means that this is probably 80% of what it will look like. So there's a whole process when setting up a room. I'm getting down like a more repeated, efficient pattern of building these rooms now. Um, every new sector I do, it's pretty much the same process. I start, and I'm kind of refining my process to become more efficient. Um, and one of the things I did, I was looking at my asset inventory, and it works okay, but the problem is, if we go out of play mode here, you can see that this is rather limited. I have a new version for this, but I was able to go in and tag. I was able to organize kind of more better my assets, and I tagged my packages, all my environmental packages. I have a bunch of them, but a lot of these are not. I was going through more in depth and exploring these more, to kind of see what I could use in this level, what's applicable to the overall concept and design of this level. And there's a lot of these that I could use on the second level, but only a small subset were actually assets that I could actually use in this level. So I kind of organized them into another smaller category. Now, asset inventories is sort of it's good, but there's kind of a problem. Some of the packages you can click in and kind of preview the whole and filter by prefabs, and that's great, and it gets pretty much all of them, and that's awesome. You can kind of see them at a glance, but there's other ones where you click into it, like this facility one, and all you see is this, right? This is not helpful. You can't tell what you're looking at, just the name. So it only goes so far. I'm not sure how to fix this. I can't just, oh, control panel, let's import. So in my other project, I have the full package downloaded and imported, and I can actually see the demo scenes. And so what I've done in that other project, I've organized the packages into a little folder, a little scene. So all the relevant scenes that I'm working with, I have like quick access organized, so I can just load a scene and actually take a look, and I can actually see a lot better what actual prefabs are available for that package. So just taking the time to organize that, it kind of gives me a bird's eye view of all the asset packages that I have available for construction. And that's kind of how I've picked and placed different things according to just a lot of creativity, of how things should be laid out. So the first detail of this room is pretty much done. Um, so I got my packages, the newer packages imported and organized. So I was working on that for on Tuesday. I was moving on to the next room here, which is the connecting hallway. So after I do a first detail pass, I go to the next sector here, which is the connecting hallway over here. And the same process occurs. I have to use my layout, and I kind of have to visually kind of zoom out from a top-down view and then lay down. First, I go for the floor tiles. This where is it? This G spawn. This really saves me. This tool allows me to literally paint on from a top down. I can go here in a 2D and I can paint on a bunch of tiles according to the specification. So it kind of matches here. This is the design. So it starts out like this. This is the new sector I do, and this is a larger kind of bit. I was surprised at how much work this took. So the first stage is laying down the ground tiles to match this. Then I go a pass and I actually put down a Graybox walls all along the perimeter, even for the actual front wall. But it's basically, this is like the Graybox structure, these kind of walls. And I go through all, and I lay down all the walls all throughout. And then I have to kind of, so there's several steps. I'm getting the process down, the whole process down for a sector until completion. Um, so one of the newer things I decided to do was getting this section. So after I set the initial gray box down, then I have to I have a process for um, sectorizing the entire area. So I apply the sector um, component, and it makes it into a sector. Then I have to make a portal connection, a sector portal, so when the player crosses over it, is certain interactions with colliders where it crosses the portal and knows how to transition one VCAM virtual camera to the other based on the portal transition. And this sector was a special because this sector has non-convex area, which means like if you look at these previous ones, these are all convex because they don't have any, like, if you imagine a sea, they don't have any interior geometry. This has interior geometry, so this requires that I set up multiple confiners, and that I handle inter virtual camera transitions inside the actual sector. And this is where my prototyping came in, and I kind of had to, even though I did it a couple months ago, I kind of had to remember how the system worked. Um, so I learned. I remember. Yeah, I figured out. I found out like how does this thing work? So the hallway connector script would pretty much allows me to define these colliders that the player interacts with, where you enter one, and then the next one collider you enter and exit determines the next confiner to transition to. So um, we have our virtual cameras here. So each confiner area defines where the camera can move and how it transitions to. So I decided to, when I was working with this new section, I wanted something a little different. Usually I have this fixed angle at 40 degrees, but when you're traveling in a plus minus Z direction, I wanted to give the player a little bit of ability to kind of see ahead if you're traveling in this direction, and at the same time, if you switch around, I want to be able to, give a little bit of forescreen. So that means like, if there's an enemy ahead of you and the camera is directly centered on the player, you're not going to have a lot of headroom to see, what's in front of you, what's coming down the line. Even more so, it's more exaggerated if you're at a 40-degree angle. So for this kind of hallway, it's nice because you can set up the parameters for each individual VCam, and it's not like a global setting for the camera. So whenever it transitions, it'll know how to transition the virtual camera, its positioning, and also transition to the actual right angle. So this whole Cinemachine camera is really a useful system. But anyways, for this one, the angle lowers a bit so you can see ahead of you, and I had to write a little script to where it kind of manages. So that's something that's not out of the box. It doesn't know, like Cinemachine doesn't know how to adjust the actual Z distance based on your rigid body's velocity of travel. So I kind of had to write that to kind of control this, and it kind of gives you a little bit of, depending on where you're traveling. Um, so um, that was on Wednesday, or that was on Tuesday. I was able to complete the gray boxing, and I fixed up all the VCam transitions and connectors for each of these different portions of the sector. So there's one here, um, 2, 3 in this long area, 4, um, 5 down here, and then there's this other little area back here where I have to do multiple, so 6, 7, 8. And each one of them has their own camera confiner area, virtual camera, and also different um, different transition detectors in order to tell the system how to transition from one virtual camera to the other. Um, I also decided to add additional functionality to do the same thing for like a where you're moving in the plus minus X direction to kind of give you a little bit more space in front or back. That way you can see if it's perfectly centered. You can't really see too far ahead if like an enemy's here, and I plan to have an enemy patrolling this hallway, so it kind of gives the player a little bit of, even at a wider angle, like farther away, it's still kind of hard to see if an enemy is coming up on you. So I think that'll be useful. I want to extend it further and actually be able to not just do plus minus Z plus minus X, but also like a combination of the two, like depending on what direction you're traveling. So it'll just give you a little bit of headspace on the camera so you can kind of see what's in front of you. Um, So I got all that done, and so I was pretty much working um, on Thursday. I was working on, let's see, I was working on the detail pass for all this, and this is the most time-consuming part. It's a creative process, but you know, once you got all the confiners and the transitions connected, now you have to go in and add the first detail pass. And this is quite a large. This is a much larger area than this room down here. This took a while, but this this one took a lot of time to really go section by section and make sure there's enough detail in the environment, with different combinations of these wall prefabs and just random props, pipes and just a lot of things to add interest to the environment, so it doesn't feel like plain or you know just the same prefab copied over and over again. It kind of adds a dynamic. I like windows with little extra floors behind it, so it kind of gives the sense that there's something behind the wall when you're walking through. Just little details that add interest to the environment. Um, and kind of going through my asset library and just creatively like, okay, and then sometimes these support columns, especially on an angle, that with the prefabs you can kind of see a seam, so I kind of use these to hide texture seams. So it's adding a first level, like if you look real closely, like here's a seam, you know but it's not too apparent. But you just want to get, yeah, like here's a seam, but you're not gonna really see it at like this angle. So like depending, the nice thing about like a fixed direction of the camera is you can kind of cheat sometimes, like depending on where the camera is looking. um if it was like a third person camera where you could see the scene from any angle, it's a lot more harder to get everything right. So I try to have some sort of quality standard, but just getting all this work done. And then down here on the floor, these used to be like hard 90-degree angles, and I kind of have to round them out to like you know, a different angle. They're still kind of squarish, but you can see it's just like a couple more of these tiles rotated a bit, and it gives it a better sense of polish, I think. Same thing here. This used to be just a square here, and I added these kind of just to make it a little bit more nice. So um, so doing this hallway connector here, adding more details, and just making sure, and then just the same thing, a lot of work, putting a lot of these details in, just random props, random things that come to mind. Trying to reuse a lot of stuff, but trying to make it not look like it's the same thing repeated over again. Trying to really randomly, select this to kind of feel like an authored design. And then back here is the staircase to level 2 or something, right? Or something like that. And the Invector system works with stairs out of the box, it looks like. I probably have to polish it up, but looks pretty good. I've been able to avoid having to do a wall fade um, through camera transitions so far, but that's something else. So on Thursday I got the detail pass. It's just a lot of just, I wouldn't call it mindless. There's some creativity, but it's just you have to really go in and make sure that all these are manually aligned and it's not sticking at an odd angle, and just really really fine tune and polish up a lot of things so it looks pretty good. Um, so I got this whole sector, this hallway done, took some doing, and I was ready to move on. On Friday, I was ready to move on to the the next sector. And so this is pretty much what the level looks like initially. I got the floors down per the specification. Um, so I'm becoming better at because I'm recognizing a pattern in this process of making sectors, but I'm getting more efficient and better at what I'm doing. This is a larger room with a higher ceiling, but the first stage, getting the floors down, and this has a double high gray box wall, so it allows you to really zoom out and see what's going on. Because this room's going to be like, besides the first room, this is going to be the second room of actual stealth avoidance and stuff. So there's going to be kind of a lot going on here. I was able to come up with kind of a new system to follow the specifications much more closely. Initially, I did these first few rooms just by eye, just kind of relatively matching what the specification is, like adjusting the same size. It wasn't exacting, but what I was able to do was actually, let's see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so what I did, I took one of my canvases and I made sure I did a screen clip, and I was able to, let's see if I can hide this. Yeah. I was able to do a canvas, screen clip this out, and actually match it up like on the grid, one for one, like in size scale. So I was able to, now I was able to actually, this is how I'll use it from now on, each sector from the prototype, and actually lay out the tiles, you know, in an actual direct way to get the proper scale. Otherwise, you know, this would be way off. And I think yeah, I'm gonna keep the rooms this size, even though they don't match it exactly the specification. But from now on, I'm gonna do it like this, where it just like, and I can go in a top down, and I can go with my G-spawn tool and really just lay out exactly the rough gray box, and then I get in the walls, and I set in the rough walls, and then I have to kind of go in and adjust the wall angles in order to be more of a curved aspect. So for this room here, I had to, so I got the floor and the walls, and then connected all the wall pieces, and then I worked on the process of, again, sectorizing this. Now it's a sector, and then the connections with the portals, the transition of the VCAM. Um, the confiners for this sector are a little bit different because, um, again, we don't have a convex for the whole room, because you have this inner space and something else over here. So I kind of had to since it's non-convex, I had to make two different confiners. So I used my method before, which was to take pro builder shapes and kind of, I would I would pretty much create these. If you can see them, well, it's kind of. See if I can actually turn on the light here. Yeah, so I make these pro builder shapes, and this is the combination of. First, it was a combination of spheres and cubes, and I would merge all these meshes together and make them into a normal, like a normal mesh. That's, you know. But I had a problem with doing that because there's a problem with. Let's take a look at. Let's get rid of this guy. With spheres, you can do faces and it rounds it off, but the virtual camera doesn't really like all the faces. It has trouble when you're colliding around a curve like this. The virtual camera, it likes to get hung up on these edges here and kind of hang. So it gives it kind of a not a smooth transition around a curve, but more of a choppy kind of, jagged, like the camera is jumping through this curve. So, um, my next attempt was to do the mesh collider with a sphere that had a lot more faces, but that didn't solve the problem. It didn't chop as much, but it was still choppy because there was more faces. So, um, the final solution was to make this mesh out of just all cubes, right? So instead, I would take these cubes, outline the main area, but then have like a diagonal cube. So it would just be like one face. And that's pretty much. So it would allow it to kind of, the V camera to travel in like a diagonal direction, around a curve. And that's the best I can get it. Unfortunately, I don't think Cinemachine can handle a convex rounded mesh collider very well. It likes to get hung up on these edges. Um, so the second collider, I improved my technique and kind of, I didn't define exactly, but I defined well enough to where it would get the general shape with less faces to kind of contour to. And for the final thing, I had to connect these two collider volumes with an intro connector. And this is the best way to do it. So at an angle, entering this and exiting that will transition from one confiner area to the other, one virtual camera to the other. But there's a limitation. Like if you enter and exit through the middle, it's seamless and you can't notice anything. But since there's a confiner here and here, the closer you are to this area is where you'll get a little bit of confiner hang up. And that's fine if you're over here, but if you're somewhere in the middle here, there's really no getting around it. It's almost like a gradient. And this is the best I can come up with. And that's fine. I think it works perfectly fine because there is no other solution for a room this shape that it's not convex. So that's good enough. Unless I can figure out a better way to do it, that's gonna be the way it works, and it does work pretty good. So that was Friday. Just a lot of work and a lot more work to be done, following the same process. This whole area, I have to, since the specification only kind of details certain things about this, I have to come up with a lot more things creatively, like how this whole area is gonna look. And I imagine this whole area is kind of like a detention cell block area where there's kind of like a multi-level ramp that kind of goes up here and kind of splits the verticality a little bit, where there's another row of cells up here and another, a ground floor cells and an upper level cells, and there's kind of like a catwalk, and then of course you have your mid area with cover and areas to hide, from patrolling guards. See, this is why it's important to actually get the Graybox level from the actual design into the Unity, because you can now really see and appreciate the actual scale. And it almost feels to me that this is a little bit too big, I want to say, because being in this level, it seems like there's a lot more space than I anticipated for the scale of the character. I'll work with it, but it kind of gives me an idea to adjust my thinking. But same thing with this room back here. I thought it would be a lot smaller, but it's actually a lot bigger. So, um, yeah, onward for the process, doing this sector, doing a detail pass on all this, and that's for next week, and pretty much continuing the process all the way down. Doing this whole level would probably take a month or two, the way I've been going, at the pace I've been going. Here's another sector. This is a sector. Probably this is sector. This is sector. This is sector, and that's just one scene, one level. I think there's what is it? One, two, three, four, five, six scenes in this level, and from the prototype, I'm thinking that'll cover about 2 hours of content. But until I get to the gameplay, I'm not quite sure if that's true. But we'll just keep plowing ahead because now, you know, what I identify in this project as needing to be done, you need to have like levels. So you might as well just start getting that work out of the way, getting that work completed. And then we can talk about what's actually happening in this room and add more features and functionality as far as things that need to be done, like how the AI interacts with the player in this room, and improving upon that. But I'm just doing the leg work of building all of these levels, and it just takes a lot of time to do that. So that's what's going to be occupying me for the next month or two, I can imagine. But um, that said, that's about all I have for this week, and we will check in with you next time. See you later. Goodbye.